Hello, peeps. We are back with a special episode today. I'm not by myself. I'm here with my good friend. I can say good friend now because we've seen each other a few times. Christine Hoy. Christine and I met last year at our Speakers Beach retreat in Alabama. Not a bad place to meet. And we didn't really get to talk to each other. And I remember at the end of it, we both looked at each other and we said, we never even got to see each other. We didn't get to talk to each other at all. There was 19 women there. And so we took a quick picture and that was it. And so this year we said, well, we'll have to talk some more. We still didn't talk that much. I think we sat on a couch one time during one of the meetings and just talked briefly. But Christine just came out with a new book and I was just enamored with it. I was like, we have to have you on. We need to talk about it. And I didn't know, but of course, God knows. She has a mother story. And so
Yes, I do.
it was just so great to know that there was like a connection there that would make sense for the book and make sense for our readers. So I'm going to introduce Christine with her short bio here. So she is a woman who feels overwhelmed by life's demands and the relentless pursuit of perfection. She had no idea that the emotional and physical burnout she experienced caring for her terminally ill mother would lead to a spiritual transformation in her own life. Answering God's invitation to a year-long season of rest, Christine learned how to surrender control of her life and move from self-reliance to an ever-deepening trust in God. A Christian writer and speaker, Christine is on a mission to help other women experience this freedom from perfection and discover healing, restoration, and unshakable peace in their own lives. She shares these life-changing lessons in her book, Peace Beyond Perfection: Overcoming the Fear of Not Being Enough. Christine lives in West Michigan with her husband and their white lab, Zeus, and loves being Gigi to her two grandsons. Oh, Christine. Okay, first of all, I'm going to show the book. It's beautiful. I love this book. We're going to talk about the broken pieces later on, but first of all, the cover is exquisite. I love it so much. And when I heard your story, I was just even more curious because I had no idea. And this is the thing is you meet all these women. There was 32 of us this time at the beach retreat.
Yeah.
And you meet these women and you love them and you hear a little snippet here and there, but you really have no idea some of these stories until you sit down. And I had breakfast and lunch with some of these women and I was just like, wow, their stories are amazing. But your story really touched me because I think this is really great for our readers is this idea of perfection and control because everything's so out of control from when we grew up. And so that's kind of where I want to start is at the beginning, growing up with your mom and watching how your grandmother was with her and what kind of impressions you got at such a young age.
So I got the impression that it was always about the rules. And,
Mm.
my mother actually appeared to be scared of my grandmother.
Mm.
And I realized as an adult looking back, that's exactly what was happening. And so children were to be seen and not heard.
Mm.
And I spent every summer with my grandmother. So during the school year, I was in Michigan with my parents, but every summer I got shipped off to northern Indiana where my grandparents lived on the lake. There were some highlights there, but
Mhm.
very, very, very strict rules. And, I didn't necessarily know that what I was experiencing wasn't normal. And
Mm.
so I I had nothing to compare it to. I was an only child. I didn't have siblings to, discuss it with. I did see how neighbor kids had a lot more freedoms than I did.
Mhm.
Uh, but Yes, very, very stringent rules. And my grandmother, frankly, was very scary. You did not want to cross her. And so you towed the line. And my mom, bless her, needed me to perform so that she would have her mother's acceptance. So
Mhm.
she used me throughout my childhood and beyond to try to earn her mother's approval.
Mm. You told me a story when we were doing the pre-interview of was it your dancing or not dancing?
Oh,
It was
ballet recital.
ballet recital. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yes, my people pleasing, was ingrained in me at a very early age. I was about 5 years old, and I was chosen to do a ballet solo, not in a rehearsal place somewhere, but downtown Grand Rapids on the big stage. We were in a place called Calder Plaza, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people milling around. I remember all these people just like cramming stuff into their mouths, their elephant ears and their cotton candy and their hot dogs. And I had gone on with my class, and we were on these little blue tutus, but then I had to, or leotards, and then I had to change into a pink one. And so for some reason, they thought if these little girls surrounded me, that it would create a barrier from onlookers. It did not, I'm sure, but I was 5. Um, and I'm an introvert. I was absolutely dreading it, but I got up there and did my plies and jetés across the stage. And what kept me going was looking over at my mother, and she was just beaming. She was so
Mm.
proud that her daughter had been chosen. And I never did like ballet, uh, but I kept doing it for another 10 years just because it was something that made my mom happy.
Oh, and we do that sometimes.
We
So,
do that sometimes. Yep.
yep. So, as you grew up and you knew this behavior was rigid, like how did that affect and shape your adult life?
I well, I definitely went through a rebellious period, but as a young married wife and mother, I didn't realize, but I had taken a lot of these rules into
Yeah.
my own family, and I, I imposed rules on my kids that
Mm,
weren't fair. Looking back,
mhm,
I'm not
mhm.
saying that. I'm not saying parents should have rules for their kids. I'm certainly not saying that,
Sure. Yeah.
but it was a lot of time rules for rules sake because that's just what you
Mhm,
did.
mhm,
And I had unwittingly married someone who had the same philosophy, and I had become a believer at the age of 14. So
mhm,
I've been a believer most of my life, but his it was my first husband. His way of looking at things, like everything was very legalistic. Christianity
mm,
was very
mhm.
legalistic. And so, unfortunately, I passed some of that on to my kids too. And especially as I got into homeschooling, it was just a new set of rules. And I
Yeah.
do really good with rules. They give me structure. They give me, they give me identity. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I was missing was that relationship with God. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I had a relationship with him. I certainly prayed.
Mhm,
You know, avid, Bible study goer at that point. Later on, I became
mhm.
a Bible study leader. Um, but it wasn't the freedom that I've experienced in my later years. So
Yeah. We call that behavior modification. So you do all the rules, you do all the right things, and they're all for good reasons, and you love God. But
absolutely.
there's this little thing where you're always like, am I good enough? Is he accepting me? Just
Yep.
kind of that question instead of absolutely, like, of course I'm flawed and he still loves me. And so it's like kind of getting to that place. So, yeah, you talked about being in chapter 4, you were talking about identities in homeschooling and your experience. I know that like that became your whole identity is your homeschooling. And then you ended up moving into the suburbs. and you didn't homeschool anymore and they went to a public school, and then you didn't know what your identity was. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I had belonged to a very conservative Christian homeschooling group, and I homeschooled for 11 years. So it wasn't just a passing thing I did for a year or two. It was 11 years. We had bought property out in the country, and I also share in my book. I was trying to live up to the expectations. We had 5 children, which compared to a lot of
Wow.
my friends with 8, 10, 12 kids, it was considered, passable, but still
Small,
kind of a
just
yeah,
a small
yeah,
little
yeah.
family.
But, a lot of my friends, they had the gardens and, raised the animals. Now, we did have some 4-H animals for the kids, so we had the goats and the chickens and the bunnies and that kind of thing, but, yeah, I was nobody has ever used the word domestic to describe me. Uh, I could not live up to those expectations, but, yeah, so I did that for 11 years, and our situation changed, and so we ended up moving to the suburbs. And my kids, I the first year we were there, I continued to homeschool, but after that, for various reasons, we ended up putting them in school. And all of a sudden, I was just kind of lost. Like, okay, who
Yeah.
am I now? I've always known
Yeah.
who I was, or who I thought I was, I should say. And I didn't have that next set of rules to fit into. And also at this point, my marriage was starting to unravel, and financial security became an issue. And
Mm.
so I don't talk about this very much, but I actually wrote a self help book. It was a little over 20 years ago. And that brought me some financial success. And as uh, people discovered the book, they'd ask me to speak, and then they asked me to do life coaching. And it became a means to provide for myself and my kids.
Mhm.
And but also I was asked to be on this internet reality show. Boy, do I have a whole new appreciation for what people go through.
Oh my god. We need to talk next time we see each other.
That's another whole story. I tried to stay in the shadows as much as possible.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
it was kind of a cross between The Apprentice and a little Fear Factor thrown in. Uh, but
Do you wanna
anyway,
give the name of the show?
it was called The Next Internet Millionaire. And yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
So the producer was a big fan of The Apprentice, and the director was a big fan of Fear Factor. So it made for an interesting combination.
Oh
But
my goodness.
yeah, so it all of a sudden I had a world opened up to me that was beyond my own backyard, my own
Mhm.
my own zip code. And uh, I wasn't getting the attention that I had hoped for, that any woman would hope for at home. And so I was just loving all this new attention I was getting.
Yeah, was
And
filling a
because
need.
it was filling a need, exactly.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really grounded yet in my
Mm.
identity as God's
Mhm.
daughter.
Mhm.
And so I kind of went down a slippery slope for several years, and God did faithfully, chase after me. And I'm very glad that He did. But it was a dark time in my life. But
Yeah.
God used it for good. He uses everything for good when we
Yeah.
surrender our
Yeah.
brokenness to Him. And that's really why uh, I chose the kintsugi bowl for my front cover, because
Mhm.
for two reasons. One, it definitely represents imperfection, but it
Mhm.
also for me represented the shattered pieces of my life that I did
Mm.
surrender to Him, that I did give to Him, and trusted Him whatever He wanted to do with those pieces. And He put them back together again, and they're the the glue that He used to bond those pieces together is stronger and more resilient, because I like to think of as, He's the one that's holding those broken pieces together.
Mhm.
And the gold glitter is just, I I feel like the scars that we talk about from our childhood
Mhm.
and earlier in our adult lives, um, they're they can be points of beauty when we're
Yeah.
totally submitted to God.
Yeah. When you go through the healing process. And I
Mhm.
do want to talk about when you went through this. Well, the whole reason for this book is you ended up becoming a caregiver for your mom and you hit like this burnout phase. And so I want to talk a little bit about that of
Sure.
what happened during that time and just the difficulty of like having to take care of a mom who's difficult.
Yeah. So I had forgiven my mom when I was about 30.
Mhm.
That was uh, the time that my daughter and my youngest child was born. I remember about that time was when I forgave her,
Mhm.
and but I still kept her at arm's length because she still could be very critical and
Mhm.
very demeaning, and I was already dealing with other relationships in my life, and so I just kind of kept her at arm's length. We weren't
Mhm.
estranged or anything,
Right.
but I didn't frequently let her in because
Yeah.
um, I wanted to protect myself, and I think in some
Yeah.
situations, that's a really wise thing to do.
It's healthy boundaries.
It
Yeah.
is, um, but I was very blessed at the age of 50 to get remarried to a wonderful man who loves the Lord and loves me and treats me the way that Christ would want him to.
Mhm.
And as Brian and I were, growing in our relationship, I also tried to make more room for my mom as well.
Yeah.
And she really loved Brian. And so
Oh.
she wanted to spend more time with us. So when we got the diagnosis that her cancer had returned, she'd had three over like a 20-year period, she'd had 3 rounds of breast cancer. And this time it
Oh
came
my
back
god.
as uterine cancer. And I still remember when the surgeon met with me after her surgery. It was supposed to be like a 2-3 hour surgery. It was like 7 hours. And he
Mhm.
said, she's fully impacted and it's terminal, 6, maybe 12 months to live. And
Mm.
I was living in northern Michigan at the time. And I started driving to Indiana every single week. So Sunday afternoon, it was a 5-hour drive. Sunday afternoon, I would leave Brian and our youngest son in Traverse City, and I would drive the 5 hours down to Indiana. And I would spend the week with her. And then every Thursday afternoon, I would drive back and spend a
Ugh.
couple of days with Brian. I did that for a year until our youngest graduated from high school, and then Brian joined me. But it was a difficult season among other things. Mom had hoarding tendencies. No,
Mhm.
that's an understatement. She had severe hoarding tendencies. And
We're not gonna
uh,
sugarcoat that.
no, no, no. Um, so we'd actually stay in her house. The fifth wheel that we had purchased that we were planning to travel in after Davis graduated from high school, we ended up camping in her driveway. And
Mm.
yeah, and she not only surpassed the 1 year that they had originally given her, she lived 2.5 years. But I'm so thankful for that time because
Mm.
um, we we just really got to heal that relationship, and I got to understand her so much better. I got to see
Mm.
the side of her that other people saw, and she was just such a caring, loving, generous person. Uh, and she could still have a sharp tongue, but she
Mhm.
definitely softened.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm just so thankful for that time of healing. And I
Yeah.
remember just before she died, maybe a week or so, she said, "I can't believe you're here." And I'm like, "Of course I'm going to be here, Mom."
Mm.
And I remember it was it was during COVID, the 2020. She
Mm.
died at Thanksgiving of 2020. So we made the decision to keep her at home. And so I was standing at her bed, and I would just take my finger and gently caress her cheek. And I'd say, "I love you, Mom. You're a good mama." Because
Mm.
I just wanted to bless her. And
Mhm.
I'm really
Yeah.
grateful I had that opportunity.
And it's really beautiful when you can have that opportunity, and not everyone gets that
Yeah,
opportunity, which, is it's not everyone's story, but when you do get that
yeah,
opportunity to just like, let all that stuff kind of go if you can, if it's possible. It's not always, but it's always nice. I didn't get the too much of the sweetness towards the end. Like every once in a while, she was on good meds once in a while, but
yeah. Okay.
yeah, but it's like I remember same thing, I stroking my mom's hair the night before she died, and I just told her I forgave her and she could
Yeah.
go and I was okay, and I felt really peace with that. You said, there was a night that you encountered God
Oh,
under the silver maple tree. Tell me about that.
yes, yes. So, like I said, she passed away. It was actually the day after Thanksgiving. So this was maybe 10 days or so before it and before that. And we'd had a lot of people, coming and going, people that wanted to come and say their goodbyes. The hospice nurse had been there and lots of activity. Brian and I were, taking care of her 24/7. And it was about maybe 8 or so in the evening. It was a un, uncommonly warm evening for November, and everyone had left. Brian had gone to bed early, knowing he needed to catch a little sleep while he could. And I just sat out on the patio, and I remember I was probably out there maybe for 3 hours, and I had a monitor so
Mm,
I could hear if she, called out and needed me. And yeah, Jesus met me there. And
mm,
I remember, looking, it was a beautiful clear moonlit night, looking up through the silver maple leaves of the tree that overhung the patio. And I shared with him, he shared with me. It was
mm,
just a very, very intimate experience. And I just felt so loved and so seen.
mm.
And I just had this incredible peace come over me that everything was going to be okay.
Oh,
And it was
yeah.
a very, very special memory for me.
I think it just comes full circle of like the beginning of the story, like doing all the things and wanting God to love you, and having this almost anxiety kind of filled like
Yeah.
unsettling of who God is. And then, towards this end of like one of the most difficult times of your life, like saying goodbye to a parent, like it's
Yeah.
difficult, it's very suffering, it's grieving, it's all those things. And yet in the middle of that, knowing that as a daughter you did all the right things, you did everything you could, not in your own feelings, because rightfully so, they're difficult, and you could have walked away and everybody would have been like, yeah, she was mean, you should have walked away. And yet, God gives us this heart of grace and forgiveness to say, hey, like these are her last days, like, and this is her last year or 2 years, right? And you get to spend this time with her, and not always perfect, but like you realize who she is and what she's been through and why. I always love going back. I try to tell my clients, like, find out how your mom was raised, because that
Yes.
will tell a lot of why she is the way she is. Not that it's an excuse for that, because absolutely that was not okay the way they treated us, all of that, but it gives you a little compassion to
Absolutely.
understand, like, there is a reason why they are the way they are. They didn't just grow up being mean like that. I mean, I'm sure there's a 1% that is, but most of the time it's something that is, even in those worst case scenarios, they probably were severely traumatized themselves, and so then they probably shouldn't have become mothers, and it just, that's the cards we were given. So I love that, you know towards the end of this time, you see God's presence in the face of death, and it is just this crazy tethering of like grief and joy at the same
Mhm.
time, right? And
Absolutely.
it's beautiful and it's sad all at the same time. I have to say, I haven't read completely all the way through. I'm like skipping through different parts, and I read on page 85. It just stopped me in my tracks. I highlighted it, I underlined it. There's a line in the book that you say, "Remember, dear sister, your worth is not up for negotiation." Whoo! I was like, yes, that was such a powerful statement. And I just want you to speak a little bit about that statement and just leave something powerful with our audience.
Sure, absolutely. Something that took me a long time to really internalize. I might have, it certainly heard it over the years, but it took me a long time to put it here, to
Yeah.
get from here to here. Um, but that our inherent value and our dignity comes from being a child of God. And, that's already firmly established. And
Yeah.
we don't have to do anything for him to love us. And really grasping that truth is just so key. Um, our worth isn't determined by our performance. It's not determined by
Mhm.
our achievements. It's certainly not determined by others' opinions or approval. And, he doesn't look at us and see us for our mistakes and, how much we've done for him. But instead, our value to him is by just being in his presence and enjoying him, like that night I did on the patio.
Yeah.
Uh, I like to think that he enjoyed that as much as I did. And so we are his creation. And
Yeah.
yes, he made us in his image. And, um, you know, he loves us so much that he died for us. And
Mm.
that's not something we can earn. And I think
Yeah.
it cheapens it when we try
Mm.
to even think that we can earn that,
Oh,
because we can't.
that's so good. We cheapen it. Yeah, that's beautiful. So true. And people chase after that sometimes for their whole life. And it's like, child, you don't need to try that hard. Like it's
No.
not that difficult. And also what I think is really interesting is like God knows your whole story before we've even walked through it. Like he knows how it's going to end. He knows the middle, he knows the beginning, he knows the whole thing. He wrote it out already. So
Yeah.
anything we try to do to change it, it's not going to work. We try, but it's not going to work. So I just, oh my gosh, peeps, you have to buy this book. It is so good. And it has a lot of peace practices in it. So not only does it have these beautiful stories, but Christine, you have like some really good practical things to work through situations of perfectionism and identity and things like that. And so I think this is going to be a really good study book. I might do a couple of episodes solo,
Okay.
just read through some things and then work through some things with my audience to show them how they can really use this book. And I know you're going to be writing, are you going to be writing like a workbook along
I
with this?
just I just finished it last night. It's a
Oh,
discussion guide.
so
So
good.
I
Well,
just finished it last night and I'm having someone make it
oh
look
my
pretty in
gosh.
Canva.
So we'll be able to do a study on this,
Yes.
and
Yep.
that is going to be awesome. And I'm going to be recommending this at our church, but but this has just been such a joy to get to know you better and read through this book and really understand some of the things that you've been through. I love meeting other unmothereds, that started off with just some difficult moms, and yet finding that place of just loving them anyway, and
Absolutely.
and with healthy boundaries, of course, and
Mhm.
knowing what you can and can't handle in them. And so the thing I love about also the cover of this book is that kintsugi art, because it is a ancient Japanese artwork. So they do take those broken ceramic pieces and glue them back together with gold, which is so spiritual because God is gold. He will take all our broken pieces and make them gold and make them beautiful. So they create something new and beautiful from something that was so broken. And I feel like that's the whole point of our stories, is that we start off these broken people and God will glue us back together with gold and make us something really beautiful and give us a purpose in life. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on today. We might have to bring you back. Maybe you could
All
help
right.
with with your workbook when you get your workbook all printed out, and we'll do this again. And it's just such a pleasure to be able to talk to you today. And peeps, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please go out and buy Christine's book. You will not regret it. Really good study for you to learn, especially with our unmothered women. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.